to myself again. But it's the only way you're ever gonna learn. You look back and it's all in the past. I'm dwelling on the thoughts I cannot say to you. If I don't say the words, then maybe it's not true.
Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters with me, Steve Wraith. Sunday night, joined by Ben Jacobs. How are you, Ben?
Good evening, Steve. Very good. Been watching Wimbledon, Formula One, at least before the crash, and been out with the dog, and that's pretty much my day. In between, obviously, thousands of DMs specifically from Newcastle fans about Youri Tielemans.
Well, let's start with that because I'm sure lots of people want to know what your take is on it. I mean, obviously, Newcastle being linked heavily with him now. Arsenal, of course, seem to be favourites. Newcastle and Arsenal seem to be having a bit of a tug-of-war over quite a few players in recent months. But yeah, is it possible, do you think, that he could come to Newcastle?
I think it's possible for sure because Newcastle have developed a growing interest, and Dan Ashworth has certainly had conversations about things like the price of the player and the terms through which he might come to a club like Newcastle. But the Tielemans situation is both simple and complicated. So the simple side of it is that Tielemans wants to move away from Leicester this window and won't, in all likelihood, sign a new deal unless it gets to weeks or days before the window closes and he still doesn't have another option. Clearly, that would be Leicester's preference, not only because they want to keep the player, but then as soon as he signs a new deal, the transfer fee can skyrocket because of it. But Youri Tielemans has been in conversations with Arsenal for the best part of a year. And they spoke in January when Leicester were not prepared to sell the player. And they started talking about terms, and things developed from the player to club side between Arsenal and Tielemans relatively quickly. And then it was all about whether Arsenal were actually going to place a bid. And Fabio Vieira arrived. Arsenal turned their attention to Gabriel Jesus, and they obviously have put in inquiries and seen how far they can progress in trying to get Rafinha before Chelsea came in and had an offer accepted. And now it's kind of become clear that Barcelona want that player. So Arsenal essentially cooled off, and Tielemans is waiting to see whether they come back in for him. And the simple version of how Tielemans' future could pan out is if Arsenal make a bid, Tielemans wants to go to Arsenal. But at the moment, Arsenal haven't made a bid. And at no point, despite putting in a heck of a lot of work for Youri Tielemans and agreeing terms, at no point have Arsenal ever made a formal bid to Leicester City. So therefore, should they give up interest, or if another club bids and Arsenal don't come in and agree a fee with Leicester City, then Newcastle and Manchester United very much come into the fore. The Tottenham interest is not credible. They looked at Tielemans before Bissouma, but Tottenham are distancing themselves from Tielemans. And that's important, not just because it's another suitor, but it's the only suitor at the moment with Champions League football. So if you'd have asked me 6 months ago whether Tielemans would have moved to a club without Champions League football, I'd have probably said no. And when he first spoke to Arsenal, they were flying and looking highly likely for Champions League football. But now he's kind of softened on that. And it's really just about the pitch. It's about Leicester, perhaps in his eyes, through a lack of depth and the fact that there's other clubs with bigger wages and bigger money and higher ambition, even potentially, that can get him where he wants to be quicker than Leicester City. So he thinks he's gone as far as he can at Leicester, even though from a Fox's point of view, they would argue they're still European contenders and highly likely to finish in the top half of the Premier League. So option number one is Arsenal come in and he picks Arsenal, whether that's Arsenal versus Manchester United, Arsenal versus Newcastle, that's his preference. But because Arsenal haven't already come in, that opens the door. And Ralf Rangnick wanted Tielemans and he effectively said no back in January because there was too much instability. But Erik ten Hag has revisited it, and Manchester United again may grow their interest. And Man U and Newcastle are at formative stages. They're making inquiries. So this is one to watch throughout the window. But it's certainly not impossible that Tielemans could join Newcastle. And I think to many Magpies fans, the possibility of Joe Linton being the more conservative midfielder with Bruno and Tielemans ahead is of huge appeal. And then Shelvey still at the football club as well. So there's some depth there in the centre of the park. So it is a case of watching this space. But like I say, as soon as, or if, and it is an if, Arsenal choose to bid and agree terms with Leicester City, if that eventuality happens, then regardless of what Newcastle do, Youri Tielemans, as I understand it anyway, will not move to Newcastle United. But if Arsenal exit the race, then Newcastle certainly do stand a chance of getting a player of his calibre, which pains me to say as a Leicester City fan.
A lot of people asking about Ekitike. Stephen Locke on Twitter says, after Oscar Garcia's comments about Ekitike wanting to stay at Reims and only wanting to leave for a team like Real Madrid or Barcelona, is this the final nail in the coffin when it comes to the Ekitike deal? Peter Robson saying, evening chaps, question for Ben, is the Ekitike deal salvageable? As in, all reality, we really don't know what's been holding the deal up. Is it him or is his management or Bob down the road? What's your views on that?
It's definitely Bob down the road. That's, again, the short answer. The actual answer is the agent has been holding out for other offers and hoping that PSG come in with something. The challenge with PSG is that Christophe Gaultier is not even in yet. And although Luis Campos will kind of pull the strings, and that's been apparent, for example, with Ousmane Dembele, where PSG under the previous regime were very interested in him, but Luis Campos has been quite clear and cutthroat, which is refreshing, even if it's not what Dembele wanted to hear at that point, that he's not part of PSG's plans. And Ekitike is somebody that PSG would be interested in, but you still may find that if they end up bidding this window, they could loan back. And that is of huge appeal to the selling club as well. So that's one option, but PSG's interest hasn't advanced too much in Ekitike at this point. And I think that Gaultier will still have some input on their transfers, which is why things have gone very quiet there. I think the deal's dead as far as Newcastle are concerned. I reported that about 10 days ago. Newcastle aren't going to mess around because even though they may not be as busy as other clubs in this window, a striker is probably the number one priority now that Sven Botman has come in. I know some fans would like a Tielemans and many will say that a winger is needed. But first and foremost, for me anyway, it has to be a forward and a goal-scoring one because Callum Wilson is in his 30s and quite injury prone. And Chris Wood is not the solution if you start challenging for European or Champions League football over the next 1, 2 or 3 seasons, despite his heavy price tag. I still think he's going to be of use within a squad, but not necessarily that focal point. So Ekitike for me is off. Dominic Calvert-Lewin could be a possibility. Richarlison was actually the number one target if Ekitike fell through, but the problem for Newcastle there was that he was told very, very early on, which is why Newcastle gave up, that it was a London move only that was of appeal to Richarlison. And I say London because at the point Newcastle were told that, it was Chelsea and Tottenham both looking at the player. And obviously he's since officially been confirmed as a Tottenham Hotspur player. So I think that Ekitike is actually off now. And you never really, as a buying club, want to say that in public, purely because as a window passes and you get a merry-go-round towards the end of it, you can have late changes. But I think that Ekitike's agent has been the problem all along. The demands being asked are extortionate, and Newcastle don't want to set that precedent because as soon as they do that over an Ekitike deal, when they come in for other players, then it's going to spread very quickly throughout the industry that Newcastle United are prepared to meet these type of player or agent demands. And then before you know it, you're going against a sustainable strategy that keeps you within financial fair play. So Newcastle have held their ground on all transfers so far and been very sensible with the figures that they're paying for transfer fees, the wages they're paying, the agent fees they're paying. So if any agent tries to break that mold, then Newcastle are going to play hardball and walk away. And that, at the moment, is the case with Ekitike. And I do think that deal is dead.
Okay. Ekitike deal dead. Stephen Locke also says, according to Keith Downey, Newcastle will target 2 more signings. One, a permanent signing, and the other, a loan. Is this the same information that you've been told, Ben?
Well, the thing that I was always told at the beginning of the window was that 3 or 4 would be the maximum that Newcastle would look to bring in, plus Matt Targett. And Targett came in very early during the window. And now Newcastle need to look at least 2 other areas, striker and winger. So I don't think really it's that helpful to be talking about 1 buy, 1 loan, although that may keep Newcastle within their budgetary plans during this window. It's more just about, can they get the right people in those 2 positions? So whether it's a permanent signing and a loan, whether it's 2 loans or whether it's 2 permanent signings, it doesn't really matter, especially because they could still loan somebody either with a view to buy or with the option to buy. So it's not so much about who could they loan and who could they buy as can they keep within a much smaller budget than people are anticipating. So there's probably some allocated funds for one marquee signing, and then you add up what they've already spent. And then let's say that marquee signing is a striker, you might try and then bring a winger in to at least add the depth and fill the positions that you need. But I don't see Newcastle spending more than a maximum of 150 million. And when you add it all up at the end of this window, it could be a lot closer to 100 million. And that's possibly why they're looking for some value. And the other thing that people never quite factor in when talking about loans more broadly is just the value of a loan, because you can pay a smaller upfront fee, you can try before you buy potentially, and you can still, if you negotiate it in a savvy way, have that opportunity to buy at the end of the loan deal. So it's win-win, and Matt Targett is obviously one good example of that. Tyler Adams, who's getting a lot of attention for CBS, my employer across North America, is looking for a move away, and Leeds are considering potentially a similar deal where you loan a player like that to see if he's the right fit. He's worked with Jesse Marsh before. He fills the void with Calvin Phillips departing, and if it doesn't work out, you can assess at the end of the year. So that's why loans are valuable, not just because you can't buy or you don't want to buy, but if it's a risk reward type player or if it suits your finances, then you loan one in and you buy one in, and then you keep within financial fair play, and you can either have an out at the end of the loan or you can have the option to buy at the end of the loan. So it's just a good strategy in the market. But I haven't heard in such rigid terms that Newcastle are definitely going to bring in 2 and 1 will be a loan. I've simply heard throughout the window that Howe is only really intent on 3 or 4 maximum plus Targett. And remember that Pope has already come in and Botman has already come in. So I don't see Newcastle actually signing more than 2 now between today and the end of the window, which means it could go quite quiet comparative to other clubs.
Okay, lots of questions coming in the chat. Don't forget, we do them in the second half, so don't worry if I haven't read them out yet. We'll come to them in the second half of the show. Wayne Bennett says, love these shows. Ben's a closet Toon fan. Is this question? if you can, please, Steve. If Ben was a Newcastle fan, which player would he like us to sign? No Leicester players allowed.
Definitely no Leicester players allowed. Paqueta would be great, obviously, and a tremendous and sort of enthralling partnership and relationship on and off the field with Bruno, Joe Linton. It would just be a really interesting signing that gets everyone ahead of the season excited. And not only that, but a clear step up. And that really is Newcastle's next task. They've made very sensible signings. In my opinion, I said it from the word go, some disagreed and he got injured. So we haven't seen him play exactly a ton of games, but it's clear that Kieran Trippier was also a step up and has so much value even when he was injured in the dressing room. So that's a marquee signing. And if Newcastle brought in Paqueta, he would fall into that category as well. So that would be one name if I was a Newcastle fan. Victor Osimhen is another one, a player that I've seen play a ton. The price tag is going to make that almost impossible. And there's other clubs that he would be more interested in joining than Newcastle United. But I just think that's the type of striker that lots of clubs would love, and he would prove his worth, in my opinion. There's some players moving in the market at the moment that have got heavy price tags, and there's a question mark as to whether they are worth it. So I would argue that Gabriel Jesus is an absolute bargain at 45 million. Raheem Sterling, an absolute bargain at 45 million. Richarlison at around 60 million is definitely not a bargain and will have to live up to that price tag, and it still could come back to haunt him. And Victor Osimhen's a really interesting one because the price tag is extortionate. You might have to pay 80 odd million to even stand a chance of getting him, but he's the kind of player that I think is perfect for the Premier League. So if in a hypothetical world, Newcastle could get someone of his class, then I think that would also be a fantastic signing.
Brozier is getting a lot of mentions. The question that I had from Stephen Locke was, aside from the already publicised targets for the centre forward and winger positions, are you able to provide any other potential targets that haven't been reported, Ben? And I mean, Brozier there's a lot of traffic on social media about him as a potential loan signing.
Brozier's really interesting. So we can talk about him first. And the situation hasn't changed from Chelsea's perspective, which is that Thomas Tuchel wants to assess him in the pre-season and then a determination will be made. And it's all very well saying a loan deal, and that may fit neatly with Chelsea and, let's say, Newcastle, if Chelsea determine that they want him to go. And if they do want him to go, by the way, of course, they would want a loan because he's young and they see his potential, and he did really well at Southampton last season. But the thing perhaps people forget is that Brozier has to have a say as well. And for a young player that's done so well in the Premier League, and he's gone to Vitesse on loan, he's gone to Southampton on loan, if he says to Thomas Tuchel, I don't want to be loaned out again, it's not right for me, I'm sick of doing that. New move, new house, new squad, new manager, new climate, new everything. Each time you do it, it can take its toll. So at some point, a player that's done well and scored almost double figures in the Premier League for Southampton could turn around and say to Chelsea, I want to leave unless I'm going to get first team football. And that's the conversation that hasn't yet been had. And until the player says if he is or isn't happy to go out on loan, Chelsea don't know what their approach is. So obviously Tuchel could see him in pre-season and then say, Lukaku's gone, I want him to be part of my plans. Or he could say, you're doing really well, but I want you to go out for another season. And then it's a two-way conversation. Or Chelsea could just say surplus to requirements. So don't rule out a loan, but it may be the player dictates, if he's told he's surplus to requirements, that a permanent deal is the only way forwards. And then you're looking at 30 to 35 million potentially. But Newcastle are interested, West Ham are interested as well. And then I suppose the other target that he's been reported, but not as much perhaps in this window, is Jesse Lingard. And it'll be interesting to see whether Newcastle ramp up again their efforts to get him, because in January, that one looked like very, very close. And then, unfortunately, for Newcastle's perspective, Manchester United played hard ball, but now we have new manager, new situation, and there's lots of interest in him. But let's see whether Newcastle come back in as well. The thing about a transfer window that fans don't always get is you've got lots of targets, but as soon as you think you've got one in the position, particularly if you're going to be quieter in the window, you get to a point where you almost are confident it's a done deal. And that was definitely the case with Ekitike, because Newcastle had a deal with the seller and were in advanced personal talks with the player. So then at that point, you don't stand down your other targets. You're still simultaneously negotiating, but you start to be quietly confident that you're going to get your man. And that's then why you call off interest. So Newcastle now have to re-ramp up their interest in all of the sort of peripheral striker targets that they maybe quietly thought that they wouldn't have to reapproach the agents of. And that's why I think that getting the right striker for Newcastle is still going to take a bit of time.
Interesting. Lots of comments coming in, and that's completed the ones on Twitter. So I'll come to yours in the live chat now. Okay, you acknowledge that you would probably get asked this question. A few people asking in the chat. Mr. Midnight says, usually you enjoy your insight, Ben, but the take on the third kit the other day was absurd. Even if it were true about it being a quiet release, it wasn't. They gave an explanation in an email. Who cares? And he says, when's there ever been huge fanfare around anyone's third kit? If they'd done it to the home kit, I'd get the uproar. But the amount that there's been about a kit that gets used a handful of times is comical. So I guess he's commenting on what you said, Ben, but there has been a huge media uptake. There was a horrendous article. I'm not even going to give the journalist a name check. I've read it now. It got brought up in our Amigos show on Friday. It was in a paper that, let's just say, I don't buy it, and people in Liverpool would never buy it again. But it was horrendous. It was just a dig at Geordies, Northeast football fans. I felt really insulted by it, and I just thought it was an awful piece of journalism. I think, sadly, when someone has an opinion about things, that can go too far, and I appreciate both sides of the argument. I appreciate both sides of the discussion. I think we've given ample opportunity for both sides to be discussed on this platform. But just, what's your view? You're right to reply to that, Ben.
Well, I think, first of all, I respect the perspective of Newcastle fans that like the kit and want a connection with their ownership group in the country where that is from, in Saudi Arabia. But it isn't just a third kit. So fans have to stop comparing, not just with kits, with everything, themselves to other clubs, because each football club, and in this case, each football kit, is very different. And Newcastle quietly, in their marketing email, acknowledged the explanation behind the kit. So my first point is just that fans who say it's only a kit, it's only a colour scheme, we've worn white and green before, are definitely missing the point, because Newcastle have explained somewhere, and Eddie Howe alluded to this as well, that their third kit is about a new era and a connection with Saudi Arabia. So that explains the design and the colour scheme and the similarity with the Saudi national kit, and the fact that it connects a new era with the club's roots, which is why there's a Newcastle element as well. And that's a nice idea. So my point is not to be critical of the kit. My point is that when you ask me who cares, Newcastle United as a football club should care. So if they are proud of that idea and that kit, they should promote it. And the point here is not to get into a debate over Newcastle's owners, their connection with the Saudi Arabian government and so on, because we had that debate for 18 months and everybody has their perspective. And as long as we argue it respectfully and shine a spotlight when necessary, then that is the correct approach. And if a Newcastle fan comes down with an opposing opinion to me, I'm not going to be glib or critical or offensive about that. I fully respect that opinion and I acknowledge and accept that it is valid. I also acknowledge, by the way, that it's a great business idea. And when you've just announced Noon as your partner and that kit will be sold in an Amazon-like platform across the Middle East and North Africa, having a kit in those colours with a Newcastle logo in green and so on is going to do good business. And then the Newcastle element on that kit starts creating a sort of inverse tourism. So number one priority under Vision 2030 in this type of context is to draw some tourism to Saudi Arabia's new projects, particularly the Red Sea development and also Neom, which is kind of like a slightly more westernized city. But if you subtly promote Newcastle with a kit like that in Saudi Arabia, then a Saudi Arabian might consider when they go on their holidays flying into Newcastle instead of Manchester or London. So it can work both ways. My point, though, is just that throughout the takeover, we were told that this new ownership group were all about openness and transparency. And if that is the case and they are proud of their Saudi ownership, then they should be informed about what they perceive to be the positives in Saudi Arabia, and they should talk about that and promote it. So when Eddie Howe goes over with Newcastle to Saudi Arabia and then he's asked about it, he shouldn't be saying, I'm a football manager. He should be talking about all of the things that he saw in Saudi Arabia that show promotion and inclusion. And this is, with the kit, my feeling that why use it as an opportunity to launch quietly because you're worried about media backlash? If your concept, as Newcastle have stated, is it is a connection between new Saudi Arabian ownership and Newcastle, be proud of that. That is the reason behind the kit. So it's not just a third kit. It's not just a series of colours. It's been specifically picked for that reason. And Newcastle have told us that straight from the horse's mouth. So then from there, why not, as Newcastle, extend that and say, we hope it sells well in Saudi Arabia. We've chosen to promote it with our men and our women because we are an inclusive football club. And then why not go one step further and have Yasser Al-Rumian having a quote informing and explaining to fans how a kit like that can be used in Saudi Arabia and how a partner like Noon can be used in Saudi Arabia. And why not tell us about where Newcastle fits into Vision 2030? Because really, from my perspective, it's less about who's right, who's wrong, and having a Twitter debate. My feeling is that Saudi Arabia in a ton of areas needs a spotlight shone on it. And that's exactly the same for Qatar, by the way, during the World Cup. But if you're going to have a Vision 2030 and Newcastle are obviously going to be proud and support their owners, then they should be doing the opposite and being proactive and positive about promoting what they consider to be the right direction that Saudi Arabia are heading in. And it's just a shame that when you want to grow in Saudi Arabia and when you choose their colors and when you launch a kit, that the majority owner continues to be silent and not transparent. And that's really my point. So it's not about being critical of the kit. It's about a missed opportunity, in my opinion, that the majority owner at Newcastle United remains silent.
Yeah, I just genuinely think some of our fans, Julie mentioned it before, one of our mods, that, you know, we just feel like we're being singled out. I think that's the problem. There's no more attention on other deals that are done with third strips, and it just seems to be something that, you know, grinds on people a little bit. But I can understand it. But I understand what you're saying, Ben. I think you put your point across. Eloquently, and I'm sure we'll talk about that again at some point, and maybe when, you know, the new owners get their feet well and truly under the table, maybe those kind of things will change. It's very much a learning curve, I think, and I think that they're treading very carefully. That's probably the best way to put it. Tom, we did answer this before. Newcastle are interested in Broja. It will be interesting to see whether we can get him in on loan. And John, he was asking the same question. Do you think we will sign him? BJT says the big subject at the moment is how can you accommodate all those people who want season tickets in the short term? Yeah, we've had this debate all week, Ben. It's been a one where, you know, it's difficult to solve. I mean, you know, 1,000 season tickets were put up for sale. They went, you know, in record time, and membership queue was in the region of 30,000 people trying to get memberships at Newcastle. It's a good position to be in, considering, you know, 12 months ago we were given 10,000 season tickets away.
It reinforces, doesn't it, the need to expand, and the only way to do that is, as a priority, get in a position where up to 80,000 or certainly 70,000 can be inside St James's Park. But there's always going to be demand. And that's the thing, that right now there's this buzz because of a new ownership group and a feeling of a connection being kind of reignited between owners, club, players and fan base. And I think that's why there's such demand right now, because so many people, specifically regarding season tickets, want to get in at the ground level, because they fear that if they don't buy one now and then keep renewing in a year, in 3 years, in 5 years, it's going to be even harder to get a season ticket. So the ownership group will have noted that and will continue to try and progress development plans, but there's no easy fix. And I think it gets a bit more exposed, let's say, at a club like Newcastle. And it was exactly the same with Leicester when we won the Premier League in 2015, 2016. Of course, towards the end of that season, there was huge demand just to get individual match tickets. And then in the following season, there was a massive surge. And Newcastle, even though they obviously didn't win anything last season, are going through a kind of similar movement. And I think that at more consistent top 4 or top 6 clubs with big stadiums, it's just a given that it's very difficult to get a season ticket. There's huge waiting lists at Spurs and Arsenal, for example. So this is nothing new. Newcastle are not the only club in this position. And there's only so far you can go with your actual stadium expansion in terms of the speed you can get it done and the capacity that you can have. And let's be honest, Newcastle on a good day, flying high with a big opponent challenging at the top of the table, or hopefully one day in the Champions League, could easily fill 80 or 90,000. And the commercial benefit of that, naturally, even though expansion costs money, is also going to be of appeal to the ownership group. But unfortunately, the surge at the moment of demand outweighs the reality of the capacity of St James's Park. So lots of fans are just going to be disappointed. And let's just hope that there's a way within the kind of community of having some kind of second best option. I'm a huge fan in other parts of the world of the way when capacities are smaller and demand is high, you get communities in and around the football stadium with official watch parties and ways of fans that can't get a ticket being able to connect with the football club. Some clubs have got museums, some, and I think Newcastle are going down this route because one of my friends is doing it, allow you to play on the pitch. Some give you meet and greets with the players and so on. And I'm not saying that that replaces not having a season ticket or watching the match. But it's just really important that every football club, but especially ambitious community-led owners, think about ways they can use everything at their disposal 7 days a week, 365 days a year, not just the match. So then if you are disappointed by not having a season ticket, you at least can have some kind of direct connection with the football club through meeting a player or learning about its history. And then the other thing, of course, is just how do they make it fair when things like tickets go on general sale? Or how do they make it on a more rotational sense available to more, if Newcastle have it like Leicester do, members? And usually that's through, you can only buy 2, or once you've bought 2, then you go to the back of the line, or tickets for a big game are balloted between all members, so it's totally random. And if you can't give everyone a season ticket, so they downgrade to being, let's say, a member or just trying to get on general sale, you just have to add some kind of equality or structure to that process so people don't always feel that they're at the back of the queue.
Yeah, okay, lots of great points coming in. John says that we should keep Ben on board. I'm sure we will, Ben. I'm sure you enjoy coming on here, and you do keep our feet on the ground and play devil's advocate at times, which is good. I just want to share this quote from Youri Tielemans. He says, "You have to stay calm when you change clubs. You don't change to change. You change because there was a great project on the table." I hope that's our great project, Ben. I hope that is.
By the way, the most telling word there is when. He says, when you change clubs, not if you change clubs, when you change clubs.
You keep clinging on to that. You keep clinging on to that, mate. I'll give a shout out to the sponsors. A big thank you to Spider Miner. Worldwide coverage from the lads. The only cryptocurrency miner that can mine 5 different cryptocurrencies at the same time whilst using virtually no energy, and it's VPN protected. Buy yours now at www.miner.spidervpn.org. Thanks to Scott and the lads at Skips and Bins. Telephone 0800 25 45 25 3. Email inquiries at skipsandbins.com. Website www.skipsandbins.com. Easy contract free and pay-as-you-go waste collection. Thanks to L&G Family Funeral Directors, 01913897245, and a Garden of Healing Dispensary, CBD hemp and cannabinoid specialists, www.gohd.com. Thanks to qtechshop.co.uk, the makers of pool tables and snooker tables in Wallsend, Newcastle, and the guys who run our website, NUFCmatters.com. And thanks to ClearKai, meet the new Game Over screen drop into a ClearRun device near you, available on Apple Store, Google Play, and clearrun.game. Thanks also to Mr. Vicky's, a new sponsor that we have on board this season. And Mr. Vicky's, you can get them on 01768 210 102, or get them at our website, mrvickies.co.uk. Well worth a taste, them, by the way. Media Arts, they are in charge of all of our video side of things. Thanks to them. And if you want to subscribe, hit the Newcastle Legends logo in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can subscribe for free. We still do 7 shows a week. Hit the thumb up to like the video, click share to share your social media, and drop into the comments to speak to like-minded Newcastle fans or to leave a comment. We're also available as a podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Podbean, and the rest. Jump on there 24 hours after the YouTube show if you want to listen when you're out and about. We do have a membership package. You can click join underneath this video now for a small donation, or you can pay slightly more, £25 one-off fee, to get your cup, your pen, your scarf, and your membership card and entry into the monthly draw. If you've got a smartphone, that's the QR code you need, which will take you straight to the membership part of the site. We do give away a free car sticker for all subscribers. Just email john@nufcmatters.com. Don't forget, we do support the food bank on here. NUFC Fans Food Bank.co.uk is the website to go to make a virtual donation during the close season, and indeed 365 days of the year. And if you want to enter the raffle for the latest Shearer Ball, it's $2.99. Go to nufcmatters.com. 99 tickets. You've got to be in it to win it. Don't forget, Tyson Fury is in Gateshead this week, 7th of July. At the Feds, there is a limited amount of tickets available. It's almost sold out. www.goldstarpromotions.co.uk is the place to go to. And the Botman t-shirts, which John has made at QTech, are doing they're doing a raging sale on these Botman t-shirts. NUFCmatters.com. $19.99 plus postage. Get yours today. Okay, back to your questions. Tony, hi, Stephen, Ben. Question for Ben. We've already had that one about the third kit. We've already discussed that earlier on, mate. Peter Robson, evening chaps. Is the Ekitike deal salvageable in all reality? We've discussed that as well. Jesse Lingard, there's something we haven't discussed. Tom Dixon, what is happening with the Jesse Lingard situation? Is that still possible?
Well, I think we know from January that Newcastle are really interested in Lingard, but West Ham feel that they're still the sort of front runners in that deal. Everton in the mix as well. I think that Tottenham's interest has faded a little bit. Newcastle, and we kind of discussed this in the first half of the show, genuinely thought that they'd got Lingard in January. And I remember talking to Lingard's agent and asking what the situation was. And at that point, there was a very strong implication that the player thought the move was done. And then for whatever reason, right at the last minute, Manchester United pulled the plug. And Lingard obviously didn't join Newcastle United. But nothing other than Dan Ashworth's arrival has really changed on the Lingard front. So we know that he's a player that Eddie Howe really admires. And I think Newcastle United are still reasonably hopeful that they can sign him. The challenge is just that there's a lot more interest now in Lingard than there was in January. And then Newcastle have explored other targets ahead of him. So Ekitike, we know, was the priority. Richarlison, Dominic Calvert-Lewin, these were still approached ahead of Lingard earlier in the window, so 2-3 weeks ago, but very much still a player on Newcastle United's radar. But unlike in January, where they got to really advanced stages, at this point, he's on a shortlist, but no further progress has been made.
Okay, Peter, we'll ask this question for you. He says, one for Ben, should we expect to see some Saudi-based players coming to the club in some capacity? For example, the under-23s to help raise the presence within the club and possibly boost sponsorship. Yeah, it's something we talked about months ago, that, Ben, wasn't it?
It was, and PIF have always said privately that they're not going to do anything just out of gimmick or glibness. So what you do want to do is perhaps develop a partnership with a Saudi club, somebody like an Al Nassr, and then you can have best practice sharing, and that can always be really useful. To be perfectly honest with you, it's more of benefit on the football side to the Saudi club than Newcastle United, because high quality coaches would be going over there, and there's a lot more Newcastle players that could perhaps be loaned out to a twin club in Saudi Arabia than the other way around. So actually, there's probably more of a push on the football side from a Saudi club to Newcastle rather than the other way around. But then you have the brand aspect of how can a twin partnership between players from Saudi Arabia or a club from Saudi Arabia or a federation from Saudi Arabia benefit the Vision 2020 aspect. And that's where you may see some movement over the course of the next 12 months. So could Newcastle, for example, open up an official football school in Saudi Arabia? I would say that that is pretty likely. And then the club get a bit of branding out there, but it's actually just run by a third party under the Vision 2030 tenet, which is essentially to create more jobs and a better lifestyle and encourage health and exercise. So like a Newcastle United football school would very much fall into that category. I don't think there's a huge chance of a senior Saudi player just being signed to Newcastle for the sake of it. But naturally, we'll see a lot of players do really well at the World Cup, hopefully from Saudi Arabia's perspective. And that's one to watch, because you always get this. And because it's middle of a season, if you get a kind of World Cup wonder performing for Saudi Arabia, particularly one of their younger players, then there will naturally be links that somehow Newcastle might look at them. And there's a few to kind of keep your eye on if you're unfamiliar with the Saudi Arabian national team. So the striker Firaz Al-Barakhan, who plays for Al Fatah, is a really good player. Pace, clinical, composure on the ball, not yet at Premier League level, but he's played 20 odd times for the Saudi national team and has scored 6 goals. So definitely worth keeping an eye on him. There is also a pretty talented and highly rated midfielder that's only won a few caps for Saudi Arabia, but is growing a good reputation at Al Nassr by the name of Khalid Al Ghanam. And what I like about him is he's a very direct passer of the ball. You get a lot of kind of young defenders, particularly who are playing in leagues with less pace. And the climate plays a part in Saudi Arabia as well, even though their kickoffs are a bit later. And they have these great stats, but it's because they play very negative sideways or backwards passes. But he definitely doesn't fall into that category. A hugely intelligent player and one to watch as well. But one of the big challenges generally with the Saudi Arabia national team is that other than Firaz Al Buraykan, Abdullah Al Hamdan as well, who's in his early 20s and another good striker at Al Hilal, and Khalid Al Ghanam, who, as I say, plays for Al Nassr, vast majority of the other players that form the core of the squad, they're in their late 20s or beyond. It's an aging squad. So there's not that many options there for Newcastle United, because they're not going to come in the market, for example, for a player like Salam Al Dasawi, who's 30 years of age at Al Hilal. And as you may clock as well, just by looking at the squad, the vast majority of the players that play in the Saudi Arabian squad, perhaps even all of them that actually go to the World Cup, will be at Saudi-based clubs. So it's also quite difficult to persuade a Saudi player to leave their extended family. They like playing there. The money is good. Martin Boyle, for example, an ex-Hibernian player, an Aussie national, moved from Hibernian to Saudi Arabia because the money is so insane, to the point where instead of staying at Hibernian on probably 350 to 400,000 a year, you can pretty much pick that up in a month. And that, again, is a challenge that with a lot of players that perhaps Newcastle want from Saudi Arabia, you'd think, well, we can get them because we're Newcastle and we're the Premier League. But actually, in some cases, they might struggle to match the wage demands. So I don't think there'll be too much player movement, but look out for those kind of partnerships and football schools that might help develop bonds and pathways at younger age groups.
Interesting. I think we'll certainly see some movement in that. I agree with you, Ben, 100%. Lots of people asking about Eriksen. Basically, has he made? Do you think he's any closer to making a decision yet? Do you think that Newcastle will be in? Bob says, when do you expect Eriksen's future to be decided? Are Newcastle seriously looking at this deal? I think last week you said, yeah, I mean, Newcastle seem to be involved in and around quite a few discussions, nothing concrete, but any change on that this week?
No, and Eriksen's in a really bizarre position, because I think 2 weeks ago, if you'd have asked him, there were two concrete offers on the table, Brentford and Manchester United, and most people still think that it will be a straight decision between those two, and it's incorrect. As I reported about 2 weeks ago, that Eriksen rejected Manchester United, quite the opposite. But what's interesting is that Eriksen wants a clear sense of who United might bring in, and Martinez by no means a guarantee, and Frankie de Jong, they're getting supposedly close to agreeing a fee at the same time as Barcelona is saying he's definitely not leaving, and yet they're pulling posters down of him from outside their stadium. So there's all kinds of mixed reports on that one as well. And Malaysia will join Manchester United, but I don't think that's the kind of individual that will just make Eriksen think, right, I'm definitely going to join. And then, of course, you have to now factor in Cristiano Ronaldo. So is that a good or a bad for Christian Eriksen? Is he glad Ronaldo goes out because he thinks it might give him more freedom, and he's excited as to who could come in and replace Ronaldo? Or does he actually want to go to Manchester United because Ronaldo is there? So with the uncertainty over Ronaldo's future now, is that a negative? And I don't personally know the answer to that because I'm not Christian Eriksen, although as an aside, a lot of people think I look a little bit like him. One or two actually call me Christian Eriksen's brother, and some say I'm Craig Dawson, and of course most Newcastle fans think that I'm Stephen Merchant. Eriksen is going to bide his time now, partly because Manchester United is a developing situation with their incomings and outgoings. Brentford, not an impossible eventuality. No chance of going to Spurs. I reported that against the grain again 2 weeks ago, that Spurs hadn't made an offer. And I think most are now of agreement that Tottenham are not going to come in for Eriksen. And then Newcastle, Leeds and Leicester have been circling over the last week or two without really getting to the point of negotiating anything particularly advanced. So what's unclear at the moment is whether Eriksen just realises more offers might be coming and is going to delay, or whether actually he's just making a straight choice between Brentford and Manchester United. So 2 weeks ago, he wanted to be in at a club by day one of pre-season. But now I think this is going to drag on a week or two, which means that there's still hope for Newcastle United.
Okay. Any chance of making a cheeky bid for Ronaldo, says Sean?
I doubt it. I mean, Ronaldo seemingly wants to leave Manchester United because he wants to play in the biggest competitions. And Newcastle have got absolutely no guarantee of being in the Champions League within the next 3 years. And I think it's still very slim odds next season of them qualifying for the Champions League. So therefore, Ronaldo, by the time Newcastle would be in the Champions League, would logically be 39 or 40 years of age. And therefore, it's not a football investment for Newcastle United if they got him. It's a short-term win, potentially, because a player like that can just get you 20-odd goals, which might be the difference for Newcastle between qualifying for Europe or not. But it wouldn't be a sensible signing for Newcastle. It doesn't feel like an Eddie Howe signing. So were Newcastle to make an offer, it would be solely as a brand signing, because naturally that would help grow Newcastle in Saudi Arabia. But I just don't think that Cristiano Ronaldo would be remotely open to it. And I don't think that Manchester United have any interest in allowing him to leave for another Premier League club.
No, definitely not. Does the Botman signing give us more pulling power for others to join, says Simon? It's a good signing for Newcastle, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, he comes with a reputation, but that reputation has also been exaggerated, I might add. And there's plenty of top scouts out there that were not looking at him, were not rivals to this deal, that say that Newcastle fans may end up being a little bit disappointed by how he performs. And you get this a lot when you have January through to now thinking it's a done deal, high reputation, lots of good videos about him. But at the pace of the Premier League, where decisions have to be made quicker, let's see how he does with defenders on his shoulder. I still think that that positional sense might prove to be a little bit exposed. So I'm excited to see how he fares. And I don't deny he has a good reputation. And I've seen a lot of good numbers and videos and stats, but there's a question mark there because, as I said to you before the deal was done, and when it was in doubt, 3 different directors of football, all in the Premier League, none of whom were interested in him, explained to me why they were not interested in him. And each of them independently said exactly the same thing about his decision-making and intelligence at Premier League speed. So let's see how that signing does. I don't want to be critical. You want to give a player a chance. There's clearly others that disagree, and other top scouts that I've spoken to also rate him, and it tallies with the narrative we've heard around the Newcastle signing. So I think there's huge amount of potential there, but I just don't think he's the kind of name alone that tells another player to come to Newcastle United. Paqueta is, Osimhen is, Eriksen is, like clearly Ronaldo is, if that type of deal happened. Even a Tielemans, but I think Botman is just one of those hugely exciting, high potential players that fills a much needed gap for Newcastle United. But if anything, he could end up being sort of quietly unsung in the same way that Matt Targett was last season, and Kieran Trippier the opposite, even though he didn't play as many games. But I don't think you go into the market and say, we've got Botman, now we're going to attract a top-class winger. I just think he's perfect in a much more quiet way for what Newcastle United, at their current stage in development, are trying to build.
Okay, any news on Diaby, says Sean?
Diaby is available in the market and much cheaper than some have reported throughout the window. The all-in fee still could end up being at 55 or 60 million, but I think Newcastle have felt all along that the base fee will be 40 million or maybe only 35 million. And that's why there is a growing interest in the player. As far as I'm aware, Newcastle haven't done anything further since the last time that we've spoken. And that's possibly because Dan Ashworth is still focusing on the striker situation first. But Bayer Leverkusen will sell Diaby. That's the first thing to say. So I do expect him to go somewhere during this window. And many believe that the fee is not something Newcastle United would be prepared to pay. But don't be surprised as Newcastle United determine if they're going to table a formal offer, and that's still being deliberated, if actually the final price he goes for, the base fee I'm specifically talking about, is a lot cheaper than has been reported. So I think this is very much going to be a 50 to 55 million all-in deal with a base fee of around 40. And that means that Newcastle might end up paying that 15 million if they qualify for Europe, or based on a high amount of appearances, but they'll be able to obviously delay any kind of significant outlay. And that's still under discussion. The only warning for Newcastle, which tells you the kind of player he is just the level of other suitors that are still keeping an eye on him. And one of them is PSG. And my understanding with PSG is that Gaultier in particular really likes Diaby. And as I said before, when we were talking about PSG, he's not even yet in the door. He'll probably be announced on Tuesday next week. That's my understanding. Now the exit package for Pochettino has been finalised. So we're going to have to wait and see whether a sort of other rival gazumps Newcastle in this conversation. But still on the radar, just not necessarily the number one priority at this stage. And that tells you everything about Newcastle, because I think fans are sort of, again, comparing Newcastle to other clubs who genuinely have an urgency because they've not signed someone, or they have desperation and necessity to bring in 3 or 4. But Newcastle are quite content with what they've got at the moment, bar the striker. The winger is definitely someone they'd like to try and target, but they're not rushing anything, because the signings they made in January and the business they've already done means that there's a good squad depth, there's decent cover at the moment. So I don't think Dan Ashworth is kind of going to get sucked into bidding wars or do anything too rash or urgent, which is why when we talk week to week, Newcastle news may not actually have developed particularly, because they're only going to go into the market for the right player and the right price, whereas other clubs have perhaps got a bit more urgency in the next kind of few weeks, like Chelsea and Sterling, or either Arsenal or Manchester United and Lisandro Martinez, to kind of get deals over the line. Newcastle are moving intentionally at a snail's pace, because if the player and price isn't right, they just don't need them.
Okay, yeah, it's going to be an interesting window. We've got a few questions here for players. Let's have just little answers on these. We've only got 7 or 8 minutes left. Isco, is that a reality?
I don't think so.
Okay. Alexander Isaac, says John Capewell.
I mean, Alexander Isaac would be a great signing, that's for sure. Price is always going to be an issue, and I think a lot of the suitors around Isaac have heard exactly the same thing. So it's all about whether he is worth the fee. And sometimes you hear a number and you think, well, that's not that high, but it doesn't mean it's not way too high for the player that you would be getting. So Real Sociedad will probably be asking for 40 to 45 million plus add-ons. So it could almost end up being 60 to 65 all in, depending on how many add-ons are provided. And by the way, this is just one thing to point out with Newcastle United that goes against them and their new ownership, that usually when you do a deal and you're going for a high caliber player that's perhaps used to playing in Europe, you will have a add-on, and the add-on for team performances could be 3 to 5 million. And it's really important fans understand this. And if you always qualify for Europe anyway, you can't really say the signing of that player has made a significant difference, because you're either always in the Europa League or you're always in the Champions League. So the add-ons negotiated are less. With Newcastle, clubs are throwing in these speculative add-ons that they want, that Newcastle have to contend with. Like, if you qualify for Europe, we want 5 million because the player's a goal scorer and we think they're going to be the difference. If you win the Premier League next season, we want 10 million. If you end up getting to the last 16 of the Champions League within 2 years, we want another 5 million. And this is the problem, that the steps Newcastle may take from almost going down halfway through last season to, in a idealistic fantasy world, doing a Leicester and winning the Premier League the following season. Selling clubs are trying their luck. And that's not to say that Newcastle are going to agree to any of these, but it's a very atypical, unusual situation. And Newcastle have to be careful with a player, for example, like Isaac, that Sociedad, who don't desperately want to sell unless they get a very high price, don't start negotiations around the 40 or 50 million mark, but end up putting all these add-ons in that take the deal to 65 or 70. So I think that the challenge with Isaac, and Newcastle have certainly made historical inquiries, is just that the value of the player doesn't match what Newcastle would ever spend. And that is why at the moment it is just very formative and doesn't look like going anywhere.
Okay, and next one. Any news on Bas Dost? Can't remember that name. Brilliant.
It's going to be very, very difficult, isn't it, to sign Bas Dost when he signed for Utrecht 24 hours ago. So I think that I can pretty categorically say that's a no.
Yeah. Are we looking at the free market, do you think? I'm sure Newcastle will be.
I mean, there's options, isn't there? Dembele could still be one of them, for example. And maybe there'll be some other value deals in there. You're not going to turn it down. You're not going to say no to a player who is either out of contract or the contract starts to wind down. But the free market's changed a little bit because some players just say they're leaving, let their contract expire, and then they become open on that free market. But usually now, a player that is a de facto free, i.e. they've said to their club that they will not re-sign, ends up being put on the market like Tielemans for some kind of fee. And that is kind of how the market now is working. And the clubs will try and get the player, even if they say they're going, to just re-sign over a short period of time so they can kind of always get a fee from it. So I think that Newcastle are not going to turn down free players, quite clearly, if they can get any. But generally speaking, it's sort of that de facto free whose contract is winding down but is still contracted that might end up being a more realistic option, only because when you look at who is out there that is actually a free agent, that is both who Newcastle might want and doesn't have another club that is more probably going to negotiate with them. There's not that many of them left. Christian Eriksen would obviously be one of them. So there is evidence that Newcastle are looking at a free. Paul Pogba's future is already sorted. Jesse Lingard is another option. And again,
Belotti, a lot of people asking about Belotti in the chat.
Belotti is somebody that, again, Dan Ashworth has looked at. I'm not aware. I'm no expert on the mechanics of that particular deal. Shock horror. I don't know absolutely everything about absolutely every deal, but I do know that Belotti was excellent at Torino. So I would recommend that kind of signing. At CBS, we follow Torino and we have Serie A rights. And I've seen a lot of Belotti and he would be a really, really good signing. Dries Mertens is another one that would be excellent, but I don't think there's any realistic possibility. Andreas Christensen looks like going to Spain. So there are some free transfers out there. And I suppose the big one that we've not discussed that's really, really interesting that Newcastle would take all day, and he's used to playing in black and white, is Paulo Dybala as well. Inter Milan thought that they had a deal for him, and that could still be very possible. Arsenal, Spurs are now being linked into the equation. And the weird thing is that Dybala is very affordable in personal terms. I mean, I think he's only on about 100k a week. So any Premier League club could easily take him. But I think Inter are the most confident there. But what's interesting is that Inter are not going to get not going to let Lautaro Martinez go. As I've said many, many times, Lukaku's coming on loan. Adding Dybala would be an unbelievable front three. And that still could be very, very likely. But that deal's not got over the line yet. So there could be a Premier League club that could try their luck and hijack that potential Dybala to Inter Milan deal. Not in any way suggesting that Newcastle have done anything. But if Dybala was offered to Dan Ashworth, he'd be nuts not to bite off the arm of the person offering that player, because what a signing that would be for not just Newcastle, but any Premier League club.
We're doing a 2-hour show tonight. Last couple of questions. Ben, are the club looking at Werner?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, I think people enjoy your opinions because at least you don't lead people up the garden path. You just give an opinion, Ben, which is great. You know what I mean? John, I'm gonna ask you a question to Ben next week. Ben, remind me on. We'll start with this next Sunday about your take on the new offside technology. I'm sure you've read up on it like I have, but we'll discuss that. We'll discuss that first next week. Okay. The last question we'll give to Paul Oxley. Ben, do you think Newcastle will finish above Leicester in your honest opinion?
I honestly do, because Leicester's squad at the moment is threadbare, and a lot of the key players, particularly Vardy, naturally may not do as well as they did last season, because they didn't do as well last season as in the previous season before. And if Tielemans goes, that's more goals out of the side too. And the defence had a number of injury worries, and Brendan Rodgers will want depth there. And then in goal, Kasper Schmeichel is getting on a little bit as well. So on the one hand, Leicester were unlucky last season because we finished the season very strong and we had a lot of injury problems. But on the other hand, we've not done that much in the window, and we could still lose one or two players. There's clubs looking at Maddison, there's clubs looking at Tielemans. So I worry that Leicester are kind of going to go from 8th to about 10th. And I think Newcastle will go from 14th. Was that where you finished? Can't even remember off the top of my head in the end, but effectively pushing for somewhere near mid-table. And I think Newcastle will be 7th or 8th comfortably. And then the question is just whether Newcastle can go one step further and make the Europa League. But I don't see Leicester making Europe. I suppose that's my point. And I think that Newcastle have got an outside chance of Europe. So that means that in my head, Newcastle finish 8th and Leicester probably finish 10th. But there won't be too many points between the two sides. But if I had to put money on it, I would unfortunately put money on Newcastle finishing above Leicester.
You heard it here first. Ben, it's been a pleasure to spend that hour with you as always. Sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions. We got through the majority of them though, which is great. Ben, look forward to seeing you hopefully next Sunday around about the same time. I'm back tomorrow night, 7 o'clock with Joe Walker for the Transfer Show. Ben, take care. Have a good week, mate.
Have a good week, everyone.